we've known for a long time that bullying, perpetration, and victimization in schools doesn't happen in a vacuum, that in fact it's a consequence of some behavior, whether it's pure aggression in young kids. But we also do know that it's a precursor to more nuanced forms of violence. And so in this next section, I want to talk to you about what we found about the association from bullying and sexual violence perpetration among middle school students. And so when I talk about sexual violence in middle school students, I'm talking about unwanted sexual commentary and sexual rumor spreading, right? So we're not talking about rape or sexual assault. I'm just talking about gender-based harassment, mostly kind of unwanted sexual commentary that middle school students engage in. Now, it's important to understand why this came about. It came about because there was, when people were trying to do rape prevention education, they were trying to get into the schools doing bullying prevention with the assumption that somehow if kids did not bully one another, that would slow down the increasing rates of sexual harassment in schools. And so we wanted to see the extent to which this is actually associated. So I'm going to talk you through a number of studies, just giving kind of the highlights of the studies. Again, longitudinal research here being the hallmark. So we track kids over time, so it's not cross-sectional. We try to understand how it is that bullying evolves into sexual violence perpetration. Okay, so just so you know, we're going to talk about bullying perpetration where kids are mean to one another, they spread rumors, they exclude one another. Then we're going to talk about homophobic language, and that's where kids are called homophobic epithets, especially if they deviate from traditional masculinity or they're gender nonconforming. And then we're going to talk about sexual harassment perpetration. So I want to show here that when we survey the kids and ask them if they engage in garden variety kind of bullying, of name calling and excluding, and we do a cluster analysis and find out those kids that are really doing this behavior a lot, we find that both boys and girls report at 12% of engaging high rates of bullying. But look what happens when we do the same thing with a scale that we call the homophobic content agent target scale. And this is where we ask kids the extent to which they use certain homophobic epithets and direct them towards others, like their friends, someone they think is gay, someone they don't like. What you see is 1 out of 3 boys engage in this behaviors in the last month at a high rate. But we also see that girls participate. 1 out of 5 actually direct homophobic epithets towards others, right? So this is an important construct to understand in middle school. Now, here we have a causal model that actually shows that as kids kind of matriculate through middle school, through this challenging middle schools, we see that garden variety name-calling bullying is actually associated with increases in the use of homophobic language. So the reality is for this is that homophobic name calling is quite prevalent. Now some of you may say, well, they don't know what they're talking about when they say that's so gay or no homo. They absolutely know what they're talking about, and it's a socialization process that unfolds and sets the stage for other forms of violence in the schools. We do know that youth that are engaged in bullying in 5th and 6th grade are more likely to increase and be nuanced in their language and use homophobic language. And the bottom line is if you're doing bullying prevention programs in the middle school and you're not talking about homophobic language, I've come to the point where I want to say you're irrelevant. The kids would like to talk to you about this. If you're in a situation where this parents will not let you talk about this, then I would just simply say if you hear this language, which takes about 5 minutes in a middle school to hear one of these words, if you could just say that language is not appropriate and we don't use that here, that would be really, really nice. Why? Well, because it's not a matter of gender identity, really. It is really this idea that bullying escalates to homophobic name-calling. And in fact, if you want to demonstrate that you're not LGBT, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, then you engage in sexual harassment. And that's what we find, that bullying is associated with homophobic name-calling, and then it leads to sexual harassment perpetration in middle school. And we know that sexual harassment perpetration in middle school then is associated with other forms of violence. So certainly we do need to think about the link between sexual violence and homophobic name-calling, and again, the programs need to include this language. Now, we also then went and tracked these kids into high school, and we found, as opposed to showing you more circles, essentially bullying and homophobic name-calling, sexual harassment, then predicted teen dating violence in high school. And because we know teen dating violence in high school leads to intimate partner violence as we age, we certainly should be focusing on bullying prevention that's addresses gendered harassment because it seems to be a precursor to teen dating violence, which is a cause for concern. So we really do need to think about bullying prevention, not just as the garden variety bullying prevention, but introduce this notion of gender harassment, sexual harassment, and teen dating violence. And we need to incorporate this into the bullying prevention programs.